Welcome to Newcastle Family History Society podcasts. The Newcastle Family History Society, located on Awabakal land in Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia, provides support for those interested in family history. We continue our special series presented in a first-person narrative by Benita Parker of the West Wallsend District Heritage Group, sharing the stories and lived experiences of the women who helped shape West Wallsend. In part 1, Ida Viola introduced us to her remarkable heritage and early life, from her First Fleet ancestry to her arrival as a young teacher in West Wallsend. Now, in part 2, you're invited to step further into her world, a life filled with community, music, family and resilience, through the years of the Depression, the changes in the town, and the joys and sorrows of a long life well lived.
Welcome to the second part of my journey through life in West Wallsend. My name is Ida Viola Bohle, and in part 1 you may recall that I had arrived in West Wallsend as a teacher in 1926, then left teaching and married a widower with 4 young children at the beginning of the Great Depression in 1930. We then had 4 children of our own as well. We raised them all in our beautiful big home in Wilson Street, West Wallsend. Life was quite hectic during those years, so now I would like you to journey with me into the next phase of my life. When I reflect on my early years spent in West Wallsend, I smile happily and turn my attention to the rest of my life. At this point, I'd like to pause a moment in my family story and introduce you to a very important part of our town here in West Wallsend. I haven't mentioned the wonderful old School of Arts built in 1901 in the main street of town, where so much of our social life took place, with dances nearly every Friday night that were so popular people were lining up to get in the door. These dances were where so many young people met their future partners and where music, fun and gaiety replaced the long hours of work and struggle. A number of the musicians who played for these dances were local miners who had musical talent on a variety of instruments. Many of them also played in West Wallsend Brass Band. It was a large and very successful band of men who often won championships both in New South Wales and interstate. While I was teaching, we frequently used the hall for school frolics and fundraising. All the various organisations in town used the hall, the churches, the lodges, and numerous sporting bodies, to name just a few. My Alfred was honorary caretaker of the hall after his accident in 1948. He managed bookings and ran the billiard room, as well as doing general maintenance around the building. For a while, it was also the Workers' Club, until the committee took over the old Josiah H. Jones building in the main street and built a grand West Wallsend Workers' Club in 1951. So Alfred had plenty to occupy him, and as it was only a block or 2 away from home, it gave him a great interest. It was first opened long ago in 1901, and it still serves the community well, or it did when I left town for Hawkins Village. During the many years I lived in West Wallsend, I was also a member of the Order of the Eastern Star Lodge, where I held many positions over the years. I enjoyed the company of other women and the many activities we did together, often reaching out and caring for other women in less fortunate circumstances than our own. In the lodge, there were 18 positions which ranged from sentinel at the door through to the organist and to the most senior position of worthy matron or presiding officer. I spent some time in almost all these positions and many years as worthy matron. In case you're unfamiliar with it, the Order of the Eastern Star celebrates the lives of 5 women in the Bible. Each woman exemplifies one of the principles of the order: fidelity, constancy, loyalty, faith and love, all of which we tried to fulfill. The traditional Order of the Eastern Star was established back in 1850 and it had a dress code. At chapter meetings, all we, sisters, dressed in white. That is, we wore a long white outfit, including loose-fitting, ankle-length slacks with a thigh-length tunic top, or long white dresses, long white gloves, white or silver shoes, and white accessories. It may have been because of my strong Christian faith that this lodge suited me, but I have many happy memories associated with it and the other members. I enjoyed all my various fields of work, but I also found time apart from looking after the family to teach singing, piano, and dressmaking, as well as teach religious education at school. One of my favourite hobbies was sewing, a legacy from my teacher training. I dressed all my children with clothing I stitched myself. I had to save up to buy a treadle sewing machine that did all the work I wanted it to. Boys' trousers and girls' undies often presented me with a challenge. I loved nothing better than to create a lovely, fashionable dress for myself or the girls, although sometimes I was called on to make fancy dress costumes. One I clearly remember was a mermaid's outfit, made with dozens of beautiful silver scales, which were actually silver milk bottle tops, hand-stitched on. Oh, what hours of work! First collecting the bottle tops, then stitching them onto the costumes. It was quite spectacular, even though I say so myself. In my collection of photographs, I have a beautiful one of that concert showing all my girls and their friends, and of course myself, in our finery. To be able to see the girls walk down the aisle in a frock I had created for them gave me great satisfaction. On one occasion, all of my girls were involved in a debutante ball, and I was matron of honour here at West Wallsend. I made all our dresses and received many lovely compliments about how attractive we all looked. I was often asked to make nice dresses for debutante balls and wedding dresses too. You know, I think I was in my early 80s when I made the wedding dress for one of my granddaughters. I know I'm sentimental, but she looked beautiful, almost prettier than my own daughters when they were married. Another of my favourite pastimes was cooking. I would make and decorate wedding cakes for local brides. Some even wanted 4-tier cakes. That was a challenge. I liked to cook after the family had all gone to bed, and I had the quiet of the kitchen to myself. If I got tired, I'd sit in the easy chair while the cake was cooking and have what the family called my cat naps. 15 minutes in the chair was all I needed to get on with the job. Although I was always busy, I never learnt to drive a car. For some reason, the thought of navigating a large vehicle around our country roads frightened me. I really was spoilt, though, because there always seemed to be someone going in my direction, and it was never difficult to cadge a ride or to use the bus. When the girls were old enough, of course, they were like their mother, and none of them really got their licence until they were married. Public transport almost always got us where we wanted to go, and if it was somewhere in town, Shanks's pony never let us down. We could walk for miles in those days. I started playing the organ at St James Church of England Church soon after I arrived in West Wallsend in 1926. First as assistant, then as permanent organist. I was like my father, as I just loved being involved in music. I did this for more than 40 years and trained the church choir. Although the number of people in the choir was never large, we practiced hard and had a special program for Christmas, Easter and St James Day. In the late 1950s, there was much activity in the church, as it was decided that the original little old wooden church needed to be replaced. We all banded together to raise funds to build a new brick building. It was planned that this would ultimately be the ground floor hall with a church set on top. However, it became our new church for all the years that I remember. My 4 girls always came to church with me. They had inherited the bold musical gift, and it made my heart sing during church services to hear their beautiful voices. There were times at home, too, when we had musical evenings during the 1950s, when we all made music and sang until we were exhausted and the comfort of bed called us. I forgot to mention that the grandchildren came to church too, and some of the older boys were servers at the altar for many years, and almost all of them attended Sunday school. It was during the 70s that the Church of England became the Anglican Church, but our parish church always remained St James until it was ultimately closed. I do remember many years later, after Marilyn's son married and had his own family, that his daughter, my great-granddaughter, received a little piano for Christmas. She sat down beside me and I tried to teach her how to play a little nursery rhyme. Family memories. What wonderful joy and everlasting memories my family have given me. On the 26th of July, 1987, I was so surprised when I received a letter of commendation from the Anglican Bishop of Newcastle for all my work for the church. I had it framed and hung on my wall. I was a bit of a hoarder, so there were many treasures hanging on the walls or sitting on the sideboards. My children and grandchildren often prowled around looking at my life's souvenirs. For almost 50 years, I played the organ each Sunday at church and for any special occasions such as weddings or funerals. In the early 1990s, when I felt too old to fulfill that role, I gave up playing in church. This was not long before I decided it was time to move into Hawkins Village. If I remember correctly, it was about 1993, but I still played the piano in the village. But let me go back to the 1960s, when many things changed in all our lives. Alfred became increasingly unwell and passed away just before his 70th birthday in 1963. I continued my work in town and as a registrar. This was only 12 months after my own father, Hubert Morehouse Ball, had died in May 1961, and only months before my mother, Lillian, died. Both my mother and father died while living at my place in West Wallsend. They'd come to live with me when they were finding it difficult to live comfortably in their own home. This was a turning point in my life. The 3 people closest to me had all passed away. I had a grown-up family of 8 children with their respective partners and families, and I was only in my 50s. My 2 eldest daughters had married about this time. Rosemary had married Thomas Morris in November 1957, and in July 1960, Marilyn married Thomas Pritchard. They were both married in our own local church of St James. This certainly kept me busy because I made all the wedding dresses, the bridesmaid dresses, my own dress for each occasion, as well as cooking and decorating each wedding cake. What wonderful occasions they were, with me at the organ and the girls all dressed in their beautiful frocks. If I close my eyes, I can see them just as if it were yesterday. It was during this time, after the deaths of my parents and Alfred, when I was feeling lonely and a little depressed, but still carrying on my various activities in the church, the lodge and the community, that I met John Fleming Muir. In many ways, his story was similar to mine. His family had come out from Lanarkshire in Scotland a little before the turn of the century in 1888. They settled in Wollongong, where his father worked in the Mount Kembla mine. There was a terrible mine disaster in 1902, where many men lost their lives. Mr. Muir Sr. and his eldest son, James, escaped death, but as a result of this tragedy, the family moved to West Wallsend and began work in the mines there. The Muirs had a large family, including James, born in Scotland, and John and 6 daughters. Like John, all the girls were born in Australia. The brothers, James and John Muir, grew up and married in West Wallsend, And while James was an outgoing man involved in the local brass band and sport, and often got his name in the local newspapers, my John, who was generally known as Jock, was a quieter man. He had married Eileen Buckley in 1932 in West Wallsend and continued to live there all their married life. He settled down as a good husband and miner until the sad loss of his wife in 1963. John and Eileen did have a child soon after they were married, but he was born and died soon after in 1934. So sadly, John and Eileen only had one surviving child, their daughter, Phyllis, born in 1940. They lived next door to the infant school in Wallace Street. After Phyllis married, she moved to Windale. Apart from his life as a miner, Jock was involved in the military from 1935 to 1946. So in 1964, and when I was 58 and a widow and had lost my parents and my husband Alfred, and John had lost his wife Eileen, I married John Fleming Muir. He was just slightly older than me, as he was born in 1904. He was almost 60 years old. After we were married, we lived in my home at number 74 Wilson Street, which incidentally was opposite the original old West Wallsend mine site. Jock kept on working as a miner until he retired. After that, he played a lot of bowls and even talked me into joining the game. Surprisingly, I both liked the game and became quite good at it. My other two daughters, Kay and Beverly, married after all the massive upheaval of our lives, and after I had already married John Fleming Muir, Jock, in 1964. They both chose, like their older sisters and Jock and I, to get married at West Wallsend in our parish church of St. James. They were all very special family affairs. Kay married Len Grant in June 1965 and Beverly married Dennis Harvey in March 66. These weddings were just as special as the first two girls, with me sewing and cooking up a treat. Of course, this meant Jock and I soon became grandparents to a host of youngsters. Jock was in his element as his young grandsons grew. When they were old enough, he would take them out into the surrounding bush, either around the old mine site past Johnston's soccer oval or out around the cemetery and Ladysmith village bird trapping. Sometimes they would go even further out to O'Donnell Town and to the dump catching birds. He taught them how to make bird traps and showed them his skills with wire bending and cage care, especially for finches, reddies, double bars, zebras, and others I don't remember. Jock had constructed wonderful aviaries in the backyard and bred birds for leisure and for sale. I remember a couple of the grandsons being so excited when they sold a pair of finches for $2 pocket money. After a big bird trapping expedition, they would all traipse into Granny Vi's kitchen looking for something special to eat. I generally could oblige. At night, if they stayed over, they slept in the back bedroom. Years later, they told me how scared they were of my sewing mannequin, which stood in the corner of the room and cast a spooky shadow over their bed. If they woke at night, they'd quickly hide under the blankets. Jock would always love going out to the dump with the boys. I remember asking him to take a small bag of rubbish out to the bin one day. It happened to be a day when there were a couple of our grandsons staying at our house. Jock said, "Come on, let's go, boys." He hitched up the trailer to the Datsun Bluebird and off they went to the dump. They came home with a trailer full of stuff to either fix or make new traps or extensions and modifications to the aviary or build another billy cart. Really, it was any excuse to go to the dump to explore and find treasures, and Jock was just as excited to do it as the boys were. As our family changed and grew, we'd go on our holidays down to the family holiday house at Pearl Beach on the Central Coast. This was always an adventure, but also a marathon event, as we all packed suitcases and travelled from home here in West Wallsend by train and bus to and fro. It really was worth it, and everyone, both children and adults, enjoyed the beach and the ocean until it was time to return home. Today, holidays seem to be fast cars or aeroplanes to motels or resorts. So different. So much had changed in our community of West Wallsend. Almost all the mines had ceased operation, and many families had moved to the Cessnock area, which became known locally as the coalfields. Even the wonderful old co-op store was struggling financially, and it wasn't many years before it was forced to amalgamate with Newcastle Co-op. That wasn't a success, and by 1983 the grand old store had closed its doors. People now had to drive to the nearest town, which was Wallsend, to do their banking and shopping. Our one and only bank in the main street, called Carrington Street, had closed way back in 1945 and never reopened after the war. The whole town took on a tired and depressed look, which existed for many years, even though many of us knew and remembered how its heart was still there and strong, waiting for something to bring it back to life. When both Jock and I weren't looking after our grandchildren with their boundless energy and desires, "Grandad, can we go bird trapping? Can we go to the dump?" While the girls were always wanting new outfits or lessons on sewing or knitting or cooking, we then had time to sit and either sleep or relax. We were both thankful of the opportunity to share our old age with each other. We had 10 good years before Jock took ill and died in 1974. As I was only 70 and still in good health, I continued to live in my lovely old home in Wilson Street. It was about this time that my cousin Doreen and I decided to do a little travelling. So we went off on our great adventure around the world. We visited many of the old family places in England and Europe, and generally enjoyed ourselves immensely. We saw so much and learned so much, we were both sorry that we hadn't travelled overseas long before this. I had lived with my first husband, Alfred, through the Great Depression and raised his family and our 4 girls. Then I had married a second time, and Jock and I had a much easier and more relaxed life. But working in the mines is not easy or healthy, and many men succumb to the diseases that are associated with mining, as did both of the men I married. I still enjoyed playing the church organ and training the choir, as well as my deep commitment to the Eastern Star Lodge, so my days were kept full and busy. In my latter years, the girls had been very supportive, but we decided I would be better cared for if I went to Hawkins Village, which really was close to my life in West Wallsend. We sold my lovely home to one of Marilyn's children so that I knew it would be well cared for and loved. I still enjoyed playing the organ and doing some cake decorating and sharing lovely moments with my family, my 15 grandchildren, and ever-increasing number of great-grandchildren. Recently, someone asked me what my hobbies were. After some thought, I held up my hands and said, knitting, crocheting, embroidery, painting, pottery, gardening, millinery, stamp collection, hoarding treasures, singing and music. Then I ran out of fingers. Life has been very good to me. I spent 5 pleasant years here in Hawkins Village before it was my time to return to my Maker. I, Ida Viola Burton Muir of West Wallsend, previously of Eastwood, died peacefully in my sleep at Hawkins Masonic Village Hospital on the 17th of April, 1998, aged 93.
You've been listening to part 2 of the life story of Ida Viola Bohle, a woman whose life spanned generations of change in West Wallsend. Through her story, we've shared in the richness of community life, the strength of family, and the quiet determination that carried her through both hardship and happiness. From the music-filled halls of the School of Arts to the warmth of home and family. Ida's story reminds us how deeply personal histories shape the communities we know today. Join us next time as we continue this series, bringing you more first-person stories of the remarkable women who helped build and sustain the West Wallsend community on Newcastle Family History Society podcasts.